The dust-laden wind carried the scent of sagebrush and desperation, as Catherine James stumbled into the small town of Copper Ridge, Colorado, in the autumn of 1879. Her once fine dress was tattered, her boots worn through, and her honey-blonde hair fell in tangled waves around her dirt-smudged face. 3 days without proper food or rest had left her hollow-eyed and trembling, but it was the hollowness inside her chest that weighed heaviest as she collapsed onto the rough-hewn bench outside the general store. Catherine Kate, to the few who'd earned the right to such familiarity, had ridden hard from Santa Fe with nothing but the clothes on her back, and a small leather pouch containing her mother's wedding ring and the deed to a plot of land that might not even exist. Everything else had been taken from her, along with something far more precious than mere possessions. The town bustled around her, indifferent to her arrival. A couple of ranch hands nodded politely as they passed, their eyes lingering just a moment too long on her disheveled appearance before they continued on their way. A stagecoach rumbled down the main street, kicking up clouds of dust that settled on her already filthy skirts. Kate hardly noticed. She was staring at nothing, her mind replaying the events of the past week like a horrific theater show she couldn't escape. "You look like you could use a drink, miss." The voice startled her, deep and quiet with a hint of a southern drawl. Kate looked up to find a man standing before her, tall and broad-shouldered with the lean, weathered look of someone who spent most of his life outdoors. His dark hair curled slightly beneath the brim of a well-worn Stetson, and his eyes, a startling shade of blue, regarded her with surprising gentleness. "I don't drink," she replied automatically, her voice cracking from disuse and thirst. A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Water's a drink too, miss." He offered her a tin cup, filled to the brim with clear water. Kate hesitated only a moment before accepting it with trembling hands. "Thank you," she murmured, drinking deeply. "Name's Rhett Irving," he said, settling himself on the bench beside her but keeping a respectful distance. "Town Marshal of Copper Ridge, such as it is." "Catherine James," she replied, setting the empty cup on the bench between them. "Just passing through." "Heading where, if you don't mind my asking?" "Silverdale Creek. I have property there, or I'm supposed to." The marshal's expression shifted subtly. "Silverdale's about 30 miles northeast of here, but I should tell you, it's not much more than a mining camp these days." The Silvers mostly played out. Kate's heart sank further if that was possible. "I see. What brings a lady like you out to these parts alone? It's not exactly safe country for solo travel." She almost laughed at that. Safety seemed like a distant, forgotten luxury. Instead, she looked down at her hands, dirt embedded in the creases of her knuckles, nails broken and ragged. "I had no choice," she said finally. A man I trusted, he took everything." The marshal waited patiently while she composed herself. "He took my money, my home," Kate continued, each word painful to speak aloud, as if saying them made her loss more real. "He took my hope." For a long moment, silence hung between them, broken only by the distant sound of a piano from the saloon down the street. When she finally looked up, Kate was surprised by the intensity in the marshal's gaze. "Then I'll lend you mine till yours grows back," he said with quiet conviction. Kate stared at him, searching his face for any sign of mockery or hidden intention, but found only sincerity in his weathered features. "Why would you help me? You don't know me." Rhett Irving stood, adjusting his hat against the late afternoon sun. "Maybe that's reason enough." "Come on, Miss James. Let's get you somewhere you can rest. The widow Cooper runs a boarding house at the edge of town. She's good people and her rates are fair." Kate remained seated, suspicion warring with desperate need. "I have no money." "I said I'd lend you hope, didn't I?" "That includes a roof for tonight and a hot meal. Tomorrow we'll figure out the rest." After a moment's hesitation, Kate stood on unsteady legs. "I'll repay you." "I don't doubt it," he replied, offering his arm but not insisting when she didn't take it. Folks in these parts have a way of settling debts, one way or another. As they walked down the dusty main street of Copper Ridge, Kate James wondered what kind of debt she was incurring and whether she had anything left to give when payment came due. The widow Cooper turned out to be a stout, gray-haired woman with a no-nonsense demeanor and sharp eyes that softened when Marshall Irving explained Kate's situation, or at least the parts of it he knew. "Got a room at the back," Mrs. Cooper said, her gaze sweeping over Kate's bedraggled form. "Gets good morning light. Bath'll cost extra, but I reckon that's a necessity, not a luxury in your case." "I can," Rhett began, but Kate cut him off. "I have this," she said, pulling the small leather pouch from her pocket. With reluctant fingers, she extracted her mother's gold wedding band. "Would this cover a week's lodging and meals, and the bath?" Mrs. Cooper took the ring, examining it in the lamplight. "This is fine work," she said, "worth more than a week's stay. I'll hold it for you, and if you decide to move on before the value is spent, I'll give you back the difference in cash." It was more than fair, but parting with the ring still felt like losing another piece of herself. Kate nodded mutely. "I'll have hot water sent up, Mrs. Cooper said, tucking the ring into her apron pocket. "And I'll find you something clean to wear while your things are washed." As the widow bustled away, Rhett cleared his throat. "I'll leave you to get settled, Miss James. Perhaps we could talk more tomorrow." "About Silverdale Creek and your property?" "Yes," Kate said, suddenly exhausted beyond words. "Thank you, Marshall." "Rhett," he corrected gently. "Just Rhett is fine." After he left, Kate followed Mrs. Cooper upstairs to a small but clean room with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the rolling foothills beyond the town. Two young boys carried up buckets of steaming water, filling a copper tub that had been placed behind a folding screen. Once alone, Kate stripped off her filthy clothes and sank into the hot water, allowing herself, for the first time in days, to cry. She cried for her father, long dead in the war between the states, for her mother, who'd succumbed to influenza 2 winters past, for the home in Santa Fe she'd struggled to maintain on a schoolteacher's salary, only to have it stolen through trickery and lies. And she cried for her own foolishness in believing the charming words of Harlan Blackwell, who'd come to town posing as a lawyer, promising to help her claim her uncle's property in Colorado. Instead, he'd forged documents, emptied her bank account, and disappeared in the night, leaving her with nothing but the deed he'd apparently thought worthless and the clothes on her back. By the time the water cooled, Kate's tears had dried. In their place was a steely determination. She had the deed, and she would claim what was rightfully hers. She would rebuild somehow, and she would never again allow herself to be so easily deceived. Clean, dressed in a borrowed nightgown, and with a simple supper of bread, cheese, and tea in her stomach, Kate fell into an exhausted sleep, her dreams filled with blue eyes and unexpected kindness. Morning came with the promised sunlight streaming through the east-facing window. Kate woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was until the events of the previous day came rushing back. Along with the memories came the aches muscles protesting days of hard riding, her back stiff from the unfamiliar mattress. A soft knock at the door roused her fully. Mrs. Cooper entered with a bundle of clothes. "These were my daughters," she said, placing them on the bed. "She's married and living in Denver now. They should fit well enough, and they're more practical than what you were wearing." Kate fingered the simple calico dress and sturdy denim work skirt with matching jacket. "Thank you. I'm not sure when I'll be able to replace them." "You keep them," Mrs. Cooper said firmly. "Martha has no use for them anymore, and they're just gathering dust here." She paused, studying Kate with those perceptive eyes. Marshall Irving came by earlier, Said to tell you he'd be back at noon to take you to lunch at the hotel restaurant. Kate frowned. That's not necessary. I've imposed enough. Rhett Irving doesn't do anything he doesn't want to do, Mrs. Cooper replied with a small smile. Been that way since he was a boy. His father was the marshal before him, you know. Good men, both of them. She moved toward the door. Breakfast is downstairs whenever you're ready. Nothing fancy, just porridge and coffee. Left alone, Kate dressed in the calico dress, grateful for clothes that weren't caked with trail dust. The dress was a bit loose in the bodice. Martha Cooper had apparently been more generously endowed, but the length was right, and the fabric was of good quality. Downstairs, the boarding house dining room held a long table where several men were already eating, all of them looking to be laborers or tradesmen by their clothes and weathered hands. They nodded politely as Kate took a seat at the far end, but otherwise paid her little attention, a blessing for which she was grateful. The porridge was hot and filling, the coffee strong enough to scour the lingering exhaustion from her mind. By the time she'd finished eating, Kate felt more like herself than she had in days. Miss James. She looked up to find a young boy, perhaps 12 or 13, standing in the doorway. Marshal Irving sent me to fetch you, madam. Said to tell you he's tied up with some trouble at the livery and can't make lunch, but he'd be obliged if you'd come to his office instead. Of course, Kate said, rising. I'll just get my shawl. The marshal's office was a small building on the main street, positioned to have a clear view of both the bank and the saloon, the two establishments. Kate surmised, most likely to cause problems in a frontier town. The boy led her inside and promptly disappeared, leaving her standing awkwardly in a sparse room containing a desk, a gun rack, and 3 cells with iron bars at the back. Miss James, Rhett said, standing from behind the desk. Sorry about the change in plans. Had a dispute between the blacksmith and a rancher over a horseshoe bill that nearly came to blows. It's no trouble, Kate replied. Though you really don't need to feed me, Marshal. Mrs. Cooper provides meals with the lodging. Rhett, he reminded her. And I thought you might appreciate something that wasn't cooked in a boarding house kitchen. No offense to Mrs. Cooper, but variety's hard to come by out here. He reached for his hat. Unless you'd rather not. There was something almost boyish in his uncertainty that made Kate soften despite her resolve to remain detached. Lunch would be nice, she admitted. Relief spread across his features. Good. I was thinking we could walk over to the Silverado Hotel. Food's decent, and we can talk about your situation somewhere more comfortable than this office. As they stepped outside, Kate was struck again by how tall Rhett was. She had to tilt her head back to look at him properly. In the daylight, she could see that his hair was a deep chestnut color, with strands of copper where the sun caught it. His face was tanned from exposure to the elements, with laugh lines at the corners of his eyes despite his serious demeanor. How long have you been marshal here? She asked as they walked. 5 years officially, he replied. Served as deputy under my father for 3 years before that. He was killed trying to stop a bank robbery. I'm sorry, Kate said quietly. Rhett nodded in acknowledgement. It was a risk he understood, same as I do. Copper Ridge is generally peaceful, but we get our share of trouble. The Silverado Hotel was the tallest building in town, a 3-story structure with genuine glass windows and a dining room that aspired to Eastern elegance with white tablecloths and silver cutlery. The maitre d' greeted Rhett warmly and led them to a table by the window. Once they were seated and had placed their orders, roast beef for Rhett, chicken for Kate. Rhett leaned forward, his expression turning serious. I made some inquiries about Silverdale Creek this morning, he said. The town's struggling since the main vein of silver played out last year. Most of the miners have moved on to try their luck elsewhere. There's still a general store, a saloon, and maybe 20 permanent residents, but it's not the thriving community it was 2 years ago. Kate's heart sank. And the land. There's supposed to be a house and some acreage about a mile outside of town. It belonged to my uncle, Thomas James. Rhett's expression shifted. Tom James, I knew him. Not well, but our paths crossed a few times. Solid man. I was sorry to hear when he passed last winter. You knew my uncle? Kate asked, surprised. Like I said, not well. He kept to himself mostly. Had a decent spread, good water, some timber. Raised a few cattle, nothing big scale. Rhett paused. You said someone took everything from you. Was that connected to your uncle's property? Kate hesitated, embarrassment coloring her cheeks. How could she admit how foolish she'd been? But Rhett was trying to help her, and he deserved the truth. After my mother died, I received a letter informing me that my uncle had passed and left his property to me. I'd never met him. He and my father had a falling out before I was born, but the letter seemed official. It was followed by a visit from Harlan Blackwell, who claimed to be a lawyer representing the executor of my uncle's estate. She paused as their food arrived, but continued once the server had left. Blackwell said there were taxes owed and legal fees to settle before the property could be officially transferred. He was charming, attentive. I was alone, and I trusted him. Kate stared down at her plate, appetite suddenly gone. He convinced me to withdraw my savings to cover the fees. He even suggested selling my house in Santa Fe, saying the Colorado property was more valuable. I was making arrangements to do so when he disappeared along with all my money. The only reason I still have the deed is because I kept it in my mother's jewelry box. And you came here to see if the property was real, or if that was a lie too, Rhett finished for her. Kate nodded mutely. The property is real enough, Rhett said, but I don't know about your claim to it. If this Blackwell forged documents about being a lawyer, he might have forged the deed too. The deed predates Blackwell, Kate said. It has my uncle's signature, and it names me as the heir. My mother confirmed years ago that her brother owned land in Colorado, though she never spoke much about him. Rhett considered this. We can check the county records. They're kept in Silver Junction, about a day's ride from here. If your uncle did leave you the property legally, it should be recorded there. Hope flickered within Kate, small but persistent. How soon could we go? I'd need to arrange for my deputy to cover my duties, Rhett said. Could probably leave the day after tomorrow. But Miss James, Kate, she interrupted. If I'm to call you Rhett, you should call me Kate. A small smile crossed his features. Kate, you should know that even if the property is legally yours, it may not be what you're expecting. Times are hard in mining towns when the ore runs out. I have nothing left in Santa Fe, she said simply. Even if it's just a shack and an empty field, it's more than I have now. Rhett studied her for a moment, then nodded. We'll leave Thursday morning. In the meantime, you should rest and regain your strength. The ride to Silver Junction isn't difficult, but it's long. Kate picked up her fork, finding her appetite had returned with this new plan. Thank you, Rhett, for all of this. Don't thank me yet, he said, cutting into his roast beef. But I hope you'll have reason to before this is over. The following day dragged for Kate, filled with restless anticipation. She helped Mrs. Cooper with household chores, eager to be useful and to distract herself from thoughts of what might await her in Silverdale Creek. The widow was initially reluctant to accept her assistance, but soon relented when Kate insisted she couldn't bear to sit idle. By evening, Kate had scrubbed pots, peeled potatoes, swept floors, and even mended a tear in the dining room curtains with neat, small stitches that earned Mrs. Cooper's approval. You're good with a needle, the older woman observed. Were you a seamstress back in Santa Fe? A teacher, Kate replied, tying off her thread. But my mother taught me to sew. She made most of our clothes after Father died. Mrs. Cooper nodded approvingly. A useful skill anywhere, but especially out here. Might even be a way for you to earn your keep in Silverdale if the property situation doesn't work out. Kate hadn't considered that possibility that the deed might prove worthless after all, or that someone else might have claimed the property in the months since her uncle's death. What would she do then? Return to Santa Fe with nothing? The thought made her stomach clench with anxiety. "You'll sort it out," Mrs. Cooper said, apparently reading her expression. "You strike me as the kind who lands on her feet, and Rhett Irving's a good man to have on your side." Before Kate could respond, a knock at the door interrupted them. Mrs. Cooper went to answer it, returning moments later with Rhett. "Evening, Mrs. Cooper, Miss James," he said, removing his hat. "Hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all," Mrs. Cooper replied. "We've just finished the mending. I'll leave you two to talk." With that, she disappeared into the kitchen, though Kate suspected the older woman would find a reason to check on them if they spoke for too long. "I've made arrangements for tomorrow," Rhett said, standing somewhat awkwardly in the boarding house parlor. "My deputy will handle things here. We'll leave at dawn if that suits you. Should reach Silver Junction by late afternoon." "That suits me fine," Kate said. "I've arranged with Mrs. Cooper to pack us some food for the journey." Rhett nodded, looking pleased. "Good thinking." "Oh, I nearly forgot." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small leather pouch. "I stopped by the general store. Thought you might need these for the trip." Curious, Kate opened the pouch to find a pair of riding gloves, a small folding knife, and a simple cotton neckerchief. "The trail gets dusty," Rhett explained, looking slightly embarrassed, "and the gloves will protect your hands. The knife, well, it's always useful to have a blade of your own out here." The gifts were practical, thoughtful, and clearly chosen with care. "Thank you," Kate said, genuinely touched. "This is very kind." "It's nothing," he said, shifting his weight. "Just trail necessities." An awkward silence fell between them, broken when Rhett cleared his throat. "I should let you get your rest. Dawn comes early." "Yes, of course," Kate replied. "I'll be ready." After he left, Kate sat for a long while in the parlor, running her fingers over the soft leather of the gloves. It had been a long time since anyone had shown her such consideration, practical gifts that acknowledged her circumstances without pity. The thought warmed her even as it made her wary. Kindness often came with expectations in her experience. Yet something about Rhett Irving suggested his help was offered freely, without hidden motives. Whether that was true remained to be seen, but for now, Kate allowed herself to hope. After all, he'd offered to lend her his hope until hers grew back. Perhaps it was already taking root. Dawn painted the eastern sky in shades of pink and gold as Kate made her way to the livery stable, dressed in Martha Cooper's denim skirt and jacket. Her hair braided and pinned securely under a wide-brimmed hat that Mrs. Cooper had insisted she take. The morning air was cool, hinting at the approaching autumn. Rhett was already there, checking the saddle on a sturdy bay gelding. Beside it stood a smaller horse, a dappled gray mare with intelligent eyes. "Morning," he called, seeing her approach. "Sleep well." "Well enough," Kate replied. In truth, she tossed and turned most of the night, her mind racing with possibilities and fears. "This is Pepper," Rhett said, patting the gray mare. "She's even tempered and sure-footed. Should make for an easier ride than whatever you were on to get here." Kate approached the mare cautiously, extending a hand for the horse to sniff. "Hello, Pepper," she murmured. The horse nickered softly, seeming to approve of her. "You've ridden before?" Rhett asked, watching her interaction with the mare. "Yes, though it's been some time," Kate admitted. "My father taught me as a girl. I haven't had much occasion in recent years." "It'll come back to you," Rhett assured her, helping her secure her small pack to the saddle. "We'll take it slow at first." They set out as the sun cleared the horizon, riding east along a well-traveled road that wound through rolling hills covered in scrub and the occasional pine tree. The morning was peaceful, the only sounds being the rhythmic hoofbeats of their horses and the call of birds. True to his word, Rhett kept the pace moderate, allowing Kate to reacquaint herself with the saddle. After an hour, she found herself relaxing into the motion, her body remembering the rhythm of horseback riding. "You're a natural," Rhett commented, noticing her improved posture. "Pepper approves." Kate smiled, patting the mare's neck. "She's a fine horse. Is she yours?" "Belongs to the livery," Rhett replied. "But I ride her often enough that we've developed an understanding." He glanced at her. "You mentioned you were a teacher in Santa Fe." "Yes, at a small school for girls," Kate said. "I taught reading, writing, arithmetic, and history. It wasn't grand, but I enjoyed it." "Noble profession," Rhett said with genuine respect. "My mother was a teacher before she married my father. She taught me at home until I was old enough for the town school." "And now you're a marshal," Kate observed, "following your father's footsteps." Rhett was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "Not exactly what I planned as a boy. I wanted to study law, maybe become a judge someday, but life has a way of setting its own course." "What happened?" "When my father was killed, the town needed a marshal. I was already serving as deputy. It seemed right to step up, at least temporarily." He shrugged. "5 years later, I'm still here. Do you regret it?" "No," he said after considering. "It's good work, necessary work. But sometimes I wonder about that other path." They rode in companionable silence for a while, each lost in thoughts of paths not taken. Around noon, they stopped by a small stream to rest the horses and eat some of the food Mrs. Cooper had packed: cold biscuits, jerky, and apples. Seated on a fallen log with the horses drinking from the stream nearby, Kate found herself studying Rhett's profile as he gazed out at the landscape. There was a quiet strength about him, a steadiness that she found increasingly reassuring. "Tell me about Silverdale Creek," she said. "You mentioned it was a mining town, but what else should I know?" Rhett took a bite of apple, considering. "It sprung up about 8 years ago when silver was discovered in the hills. Typical boom town, grew fast with all the usual elements. Saloons, brothels, gambling halls." He glanced at her. "Not the sort of place a lady would feel at home, at least in the beginning." "And my uncle lived there, near there," Rhett corrected. "His property is outside the town proper. He was there before the silver strike, raising cattle on a small scale. The boom probably brought him some prosperity selling beef to the miners, but he never seemed much interested in the town itself." "What was he like?" Kate asked, curious about this unknown relative. "Quiet, self-sufficient, had a reputation for being fair in his dealings." Rhett paused. "Kept to himself mostly, but would help a neighbor in need without being asked. People respected that." It wasn't much to go on, but Kate found herself glad to know that her uncle had been a decent man. It made the property, if it truly was hers, feel less like a stranger's legacy and more like a family inheritance. "We should get moving if we want to reach Silver Junction before dark," Rhett said, standing and brushing crumbs from his trousers. They continued eastward, the landscape gradually changing as they rode. The hills grew steeper, with more trees dotting the slopes. By mid-afternoon, they could see mountains in the distance, their peaks still holding patches of snow despite the late summer heat. "Silver Junction's just over that rise," Rhett said, pointing to a hill ahead of them. "It's the county seat, bigger than Copper Ridge. They've got a hotel where we can stay tonight." As they crested the hill, Kate got her first view of Silver Junction, a substantial town nestled in a wide valley, with a river winding along its western edge. Even from a distance, she could see it was more developed than Copper Ridge, with several multi-story buildings and what appeared to be a proper church steeple rising above the rooftops. "It's bigger than I expected," she commented. "The railroad came through 5 years ago," Rhett explained. "Made it an important shipping point for ore and cattle. The mines in these parts are still producing, unlike Silverdale." They rode into town as the afternoon shadows lengthened, passing warehouses and lumber yards before reaching the main street with its shops, offices, and saloons. People moved about with purpose miners in dirty clothes heading for the saloons after their shift, well-dressed businessmen consulting pocket watches, women shopping or hustling children along the wooden sidewalks. Rhett led them to a sturdy two-story building with a sign proclaiming it the Silver Junction Hotel. A boy came running to take their horses as they dismounted. "Stable and feed them well," Rhett told the boy, handing him a coin. "We'll be needing them fresh in the morning." Inside, the hotel was simply but comfortably furnished, with a small lobby and a dining room visible through an archway. Rhett approached the front desk, speaking briefly with the clerk before returning to Kate. "Got us 2 rooms," he said. "The dining room serves supper until 8. I thought we could head to the county clerk's office now. It's just down the street, and they're open until 6. Kate nodded, trying to calm the sudden flutter of nerves in her stomach. Within hours, she might know whether the deed she carried was legitimate or just another part of Blackwell's elaborate deception. The county clerk's office occupied the first floor of the courthouse, a grand stone building in the center of town. Inside, they found a sparse room with several tall filing cabinets and a counter behind which a thin, balding man in spectacles was writing in a large ledger. He looked up as they entered. "Help you folks, Marshal Rhett Irving from Copper Ridge," Rhett said, showing his badge. "And Miss Catherine James. We need to verify a property deed in Silverdale Creek." The clerk's eyebrows rose slightly. "Silverdale, eh? Not much call for property records there these days. Most folks are selling, not buying." "The property would have belonged to Thomas James," Kate said, stepping forward. "He was my uncle. I understand he passed away last winter." "Tom James," the clerk mused. "Name sounds familiar. Let me check the records." He disappeared into the forest of filing cabinets, returning several minutes later with a thick leather-bound book. "Property transactions for Eagle County, Eastern District," he explained, setting it on the counter and opening it. His finger traced down several pages before stopping. "Here we are. Thomas James. Purchased 160 acres 3 miles northeast of what's now Silverdale Creek in 1868. Paid in full, taxes current through last year." Kate's heart leapt. "And ownership now." The clerk turned another page. "Last will and testament filed February of this year, following his death in January. Property bequeathed to his niece, Catherine Elizabeth James of Santa Fe, New Mexico Territory." He glanced up. "That would be you, I presume?" "Yes," Kate said, a wave of relief washing over her. "Yes, that's me." "You'll need to sign some documents to officially claim the property," the clerk said. "And there are back taxes due for this year, $22.40. Kate's relief faltered. She had no money to pay taxes, having spent her last coin on food for the journey. "I'll cover the taxes," Rhett said quietly. "No, I couldn't," Kate began, but Rhett cut her off. "It's an investment in Silverdale's future," he said with a slight smile. "Having a school teacher take up residence might bring some families back. You can repay me when you're settled." Kate wanted to refuse to maintain her independence, but practicality won out. Without paying the taxes, she couldn't claim the property. And without the property, she truly had nothing. "Thank you," she said simply. "I will repay you." The clerk prepared the necessary documents, which Kate signed with a steady hand despite her inner turmoil. Rhett paid the tax amount, and in return, they received an official certificate of ownership and a map showing the property boundaries. "Congratulations, Miss James," the clerk said, handing her the papers. "You're now a landowner in Eagle County." Outside, as the setting sun cast long shadows across the courthouse steps, Kate stopped and took a deep breath of the mountain air. "It's real," she said, half to herself. "It's really mine." "Did you think it wouldn't be?" Rhett asked, after everything with Blackwell. "Yes, I feared it might be just another deception." Kate looked down at the papers in her hands. I own land, a home, somewhere to begin again. We should celebrate, Rhett said, his blue eyes warm. The hotel restaurant is supposed to be quite good. Kate hesitated, then smiled. Yes, I'd like that. But first, I need to find a bank. I have something I need to retrieve from Mrs. Cooper when we return to Copper Ridge. Rhett looked puzzled but didn't question her. The bank's just up the street. Should still be open for another half hour. At the bank, Kate explained her situation to the manager that she'd just inherited property and would need to establish credit to make improvements. The manager was skeptical until Rhett vouched for her, and the clerk's documents were presented. In the end, she was able to open a small account with the promise of depositing funds upon her return to Copper Ridge. That evening, seated across from Rhett in the hotel dining room, with a hearty beef stew and fresh bread before her, Kate felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time: genuine optimism. To new beginnings, Rhett said, raising his glass of cider. Kate clinked her glass against his. And to borrowed hope, she added softly, which seems to be taking root. Rhett's smile reached his eyes, crinkling the corners in a way that made him look younger, less careworn. I'm glad to hear it. You deserve a fresh start, Kate. They lingered over their meal, talking easily about books they'd read, places they'd seen, and their childhoods, his in Colorado, hers in Missouri before her family moved to New Mexico after the war. Kate found herself laughing at Rhett's stories of his misadventures as a boy, and sharing her own memories of teaching stubborn young girls who'd rather be anywhere than in a schoolroom. Will you go back to teaching? Rhett asked as they finished dessert apple pie that wasn't as good as Mrs. Cooper's but was still delicious. If there are children to teach, Kate said. From what you've said about Silverdale, that might not be the case. Towns change, Rhett observed. Silverdale might not be thriving now, but that doesn't mean it won't again. Different industries, different people. You sound hopeful for a place you described as struggling, Kate teased. Rhett shrugged, looking slightly embarrassed. Maybe your borrowed hope is working both ways. Later, as Rhett walked her to her room, Kate found herself reluctant for the evening to end. At her door, she turned to face him. Thank you, she said. Not just for the taxes and the journey, but for believing this was possible when I was afraid to. You're the one who rode all the way from Santa Fe on nothing but a deed and determination, Rhett pointed out. I'd say you believed more than you're giving yourself credit for. Kate smiled, suddenly shy. Perhaps. Good night, Rhett. Good night, Kate. Sleep well. Tomorrow we see your new home. In her room, Kate sat by the window for a long time, looking out at the stars visible above the town's rooftops. Tomorrow she would see her uncle's property, her property now. Whether it was a sturdy house or a crumbling shack, productive land or barren soil, it was a chance to build something new. A life of her own making, not defined by loss or deception. For the first time since Harlan Blackwell's betrayal, Kate felt the weight lifting from her heart. The hope Rhett had offered was becoming her own, growing stronger with each passing day. And with it came something else, a warm, fluttering feeling whenever she thought of the marshal with the kind blue eyes and quiet strength. A feeling that, for now, she tucked away like a precious seed, uncertain but hopeful about what might bloom. They set out from Silver Junction at dawn, the morning air crisp and clear with the promise of a fine day ahead. Rhett had plotted their route to Silverdale Creek, estimating they could reach Kate's property by mid-afternoon if they maintained a steady pace. The terrain gets rougher as we head northeast, he explained as they rode. More hills, some forest. The creek that gives the town its name runs right through the valley where your uncle's land sits. Kate nodded, her mind already racing ahead to what might await her. Would the house be intact? Would there be livestock still on the property? The clerk's records hadn't specified details beyond acreage and boundaries. As they rode, The landscape gradually shifted from rolling hills to more dramatic terrain, with steeper slopes covered in pine and aspen. Wildflowers dotted the meadows they passed through, adding splashes of color to the green and gold landscape. By noon, they had climbed high enough to look down into a valley where a small collection of buildings was visible in the distance. "Silverdale Creek," Rhett said, pointing. "Your property is beyond it, on the far side of that ridge with the stand of pines." Kate stared at the town, trying to reconcile the modest cluster of structures with the booming mining community Rhett had described. Even from a distance, she could see that many buildings appeared abandoned, their windows dark and empty. They descended into the valley, the trail winding through stands of aspen trees whose leaves were just beginning to turn gold at the edges. As they approached the town, Kate could see that her initial impression had been correct. Silverdale Creek was a shadow of its former self. The main street held a general store, a saloon, a small church, and perhaps a dozen other buildings, many with boarded windows or sagging porches. A few people moved about: a woman hanging laundry, an old man sitting in a rocking chair outside the general store, a couple of rough-looking men emerging from the saloon. All stopped to watch as Kate and Rhett rode through. "Marshall Irving," the old man called from his chair. "Don't often see you this far from Copper Ridge, Mr. Fletcher," Rhett greeted him, reining in. "Just escorting Miss James here to her property. She's Thomas James's niece, come to claim her inheritance." Fletcher's roomy eyes studied Kate with interest. "Tom's niece, eh? Heard he had family back east somewhere. Sorry about your uncle, miss. Good man." "Thank you," Kate said. "Did you know him well?" "Well, as anyone did, I suppose. Kept to himself mostly, but fair in his dealings. Helped me rebuild my barn after a storm took the roof off 3 years back." Fletcher shifted in his chair. "Property's been sitting empty since he passed. Mendoza, Mexican fella who worked for your uncle, he's been checking on it weekly, making sure no squatters move in." "Is Mr. Mendoza still in town?" Rhett asked. "Yep. Lives out past the old mill with his wife and young'uns. Works odd jobs now, but I reckon he'd be glad to hear Tom's niece has arrived." They thanked Fletcher for the information and continued through town, drawing more curious stares as they went. Kate felt a growing unease under the scrutiny, but reminded herself that newcomers were probably rare in Silverdale these days. Beyond the town, the trail followed the creek for about 2 miles before branching north toward a ridge covered with pine trees. As they crested the ridge, Kate got her first view of her uncle's property, and her breath caught in her throat. The valley below was beautiful, a natural meadow bordered by forest on 3 sides, with the creek cutting through it in a silver ribbon. In the center stood a sturdy log cabin with a stone chimney, a barn, and several smaller outbuildings. A split-rail fence enclosed a corral where, to Kate's surprise, several horses grazed. "It's lovely," she whispered. Rhett nodded, a small smile playing at his lips. "Tom chose well when he settled here. Good water, sheltered from the worst of the winter winds by those ridges, plenty of grazing land." They rode down into the valley, and as they approached the cabin, Kate noticed more details. The buildings were weathered but appeared well maintained. A small garden plot was visible behind the cabin, overgrown now but clearly once productive. Apple trees, heavy with nearly ripe fruit, stood near a root cellar built into the hillside. "Someone's been caring for the place," Rhett observed as they reached the cabin. "Probably this Mendoza fellow Fletcher mentioned." They dismounted, and Kate approached the cabin with a mixture of trepidation and excitement. The door was secured with a heavy iron padlock. "I don't have a key," she realized. Before Rhett could respond, the sound of hoofbeats made them turn. A man was riding toward them from the direction of town, lean and weathered, with dark hair and a mustache, mounted on a dun-colored horse. "That would be Mendoza, I'm guessing," Rhett said. and I'd wager he has the key. The rider approached, eyeing them cautiously. "Can I help you folks?" he asked, his English accented but clear. "I'm Marshall Irving from Copper Ridge," Rhett said. "This is Miss Catherine James, Thomas James's niece and heir. She's come to claim her property." The man's expression shifted from wariness to surprise. "Senor Thomas's Sabrina, his niece." He studied Kate carefully. "He spoke of you sometimes, said you were a teacher." "I am," Kate confirmed, moved to hear that her uncle had known of her. "And you are Mr. Mendoza. Mr. Fletcher in town said you've been watching over the property." Yes, Javier Mendoza." He dismounted, removing his hat. "I worked for your uncle for 8 years. When he fell sick, he asked me to keep an eye on the place until you could come." Mendoza reached into his pocket and pulled out a key. "He said you would come eventually." Kate's eyes filled with tears as she took the key. "Thank you for honoring his wishes, Mr. Mendoza. I didn't know him, but I'm grateful for your care of his home." "Our home now," Mendoza corrected gently. "Would you like to see inside?" The cabin was larger than it appeared from outside, 2 main rooms with a loft above. The front room served as kitchen and living area, with a massive stone fireplace, a solid table with benches, and several handcrafted chairs. A bookshelf held a surprising number of volumes, and Kate ran her fingers over their spines, discovering works of history, philosophy, and literature that suggested her uncle had been a learned man. The second room contained a bed, a chest of drawers, and a small writing desk. Simple but comfortable. The loft, accessible by a ladder, had 2 more sleeping areas, one that appeared to have been used as storage, the other set up as a spare bedroom. "Your uncle lived simply but well," Mendoza explained as they explored. "He was not a man for fancy things, but he appreciated quality and comfort." "The horses I saw, are they his?" "Mine, I mean," Kate asked. "She. 4 good horses and 2 milk cows. There were more cattle, but after Senor Thomas died, I sold most of them and kept the money safe for you." Mendoza reached into his jacket and pulled out a small leather pouch. $342. The price of cattle was good this spring. Kate stared at the pouch in shock. It was more money than she'd expected, enough to live on for months while she decided what to do with the property. "I thank you, Mr. Mendoza, for everything." "It was what Senor Thomas wanted," he said simply. "He spoke often of his niece the teacher, and how he hoped you would come to love this land as he did." Later, after Mendoza had shown them the rest of the property and ridden back to his own home with a promise to return the next day, Kate sat on the cabin's porch watching the sunset paint the western sky in brilliant oranges and reds. Rhett joined her, carrying 2 cups of coffee he'd brewed on the cabin's wood stove. "Quite a day," he said, handing her a cup. "It doesn't seem real," Kate admitted. "Yesterday I had nothing. Today I have a home, land, livestock, and more money than I've seen in years." "And a good man in Mendoza who clearly respected your uncle and seems willing to help you." Kate nodded, sipping the strong coffee. "I keep waiting for the catch, for something to go wrong." "Not everything has a catch, Kate," Rhett said gently. "Sometimes good things happen simply because they're meant to." She turned to look at him, this man who had offered hope when hers was gone, who had helped her claim her inheritance without asking anything in return. The fading sunlight caught in his hair, highlighting those copper strands, and his blue eyes held a warmth that made her heart beat faster. "Why did you help me?" she asked suddenly. "Really? You could have pointed me toward Silver Junction and wished me luck. You didn't have to come all this way, pay my taxes, spend days away from your duties." Rhett was quiet for a long moment, his gaze moving from her face to the sunset and back again. "When you said he took your hope, I knew what that felt like, to have something essential stolen from you." He set his coffee cup down. "After my father was killed, I was angry for a long time, felt like my future had been stolen, My mother helped me find my way back, but she's gone now, too." "I'm sorry," Kate said softly. "It was years ago," Rhett said, though his expression suggested the wound wasn't entirely healed. "The point is, I recognized that look in your eyes, and I thought maybe I could help the way others helped me when I needed it." The simplicity and honesty of his answer touched Kate deeply. "Well, you did help, more than I can properly thank you for. Seeing you claim what's rightfully yours is thanks enough," Rhett said. "And knowing Silverdale Creek has gained a new resident with grit and determination, that's a bonus." They sat in companionable silence as the last light faded from the sky and stars began to appear overhead. The night was peaceful, with only the sound of the creek and the occasional call of an owl to break the quiet. "I should head back to town," Rhett said eventually, standing. "The saloon keeps rooms for travelers. I'll return in the morning to help you get properly settled before I ride back to Copper Ridge." "You're leaving tomorrow?" Kate asked, unable to keep the disappointment from her voice. "I've been away from my duties for 3 days already," Rhett said. "And you seem to be in good hands with Mendoza." He hesitated. "Unless you'd prefer I stay longer." Kate wanted to say yes, to ask him to remain another day or two, but pride held her tongue. She'd already accepted so much help from him, she couldn't ask for more. "No, of course." "You have responsibilities. I understand." Rhett looked like he might say something more, but instead he picked up his hat from the porch rail. "Good night, Kate. Sleep well in your new home." "Good night, Rhett. Thank you for everything." As she watched him ride away, Kate felt a curious mixture of emotions: gratitude, contentment, and an unexpected sense of loss. She'd known him only a few days, yet the thought of his departure left an emptiness she hadn't anticipated. Inside the cabin, she lit the oil lamps Mendoza had filled and explored more thoroughly. The kitchen shelves held basic provisions: flour, sugar, coffee, dried beans. The root cellar contained preserved vegetables, smoked meat, and several bottles of what appeared to be homemade wine. In her uncle's bedroom, Kate found a cedar chest containing personal items: a pocket watch, letters tied with string, a daguerreotype of a much younger Thomas James standing beside a woman who might have been Kate's grandmother. And at the bottom, wrapped in a handkerchief, was a journal bound in worn leather. Curious, Kate took it to the kitchen table and began to read by lamplight. The journal spanned several years, with entries sometimes daily, sometimes separated by weeks or months. Her uncle wrote about the changing seasons, the work of the ranch, the antics of a fox family that denned near the creek. There were philosophical musings and occasional memories of his childhood, including mentions of his sister, Kate's mother. But what caught Kate's attention most were the entries from the last year of his life, after he'd received word of his sister's death. He wrote of regret for the years of estrangement, of hope that his niece might someday come to Colorado, of his decision to leave her the property. The final entry, dated just days before his death according to Mendoza, was addressed directly to her. "Catherine, if you are reading this, then you have found your way to this valley. I regret that we never met in life, but I hope this land will offer you what it has given me: peace, purpose, and the chance to build something meaningful. The world can be hard, especially on those who walk alone. But remember that true strength often lies in knowing when to accept help and in offering it to others when you can. This land is yours now. May it bring you the happiness it has brought me. Your uncle, Thomas." Kate closed the journal, tears streaming down her face. It was as if her uncle had known exactly what she would need to hear, even years after his death. She had come to Colorado expecting at best a piece of property, at worst another disappointment. Instead, she had found a legacy and perhaps a purpose. As she prepared for bed in her uncle's, now her room, Kate's mind kept returning to Rhett. His imminent departure felt wrong somehow, like a story ending before its proper conclusion. But what right did she have to ask him to stay? He had his own life, his own responsibilities in Copper Ridge. Sleep came slowly, filled with dreams of blue eyes and borrowed hope. Morning brought the sound of hoofbeats, and Kate rushed to the door expecting to see Rhett. Instead, it was Javier Mendoza, accompanied by a woman and 2 children on a wagon laden with supplies. "Good morning, Miss James," Mendoza called. "I hope you slept well. This is my wife, Elena, and our children, Miguel and Lucia." Elena Mendoza was a handsome woman with kind eyes and a warm smile. The children, a boy of about 10 and a girl perhaps 7, regarded Kate with open curiosity. "My wife thought you might need some things to get properly settled," Mendoza explained as they unloaded the wagon. "Fresh bread, eggs, butter. And the children wanted to meet the new owner of Senor Thomas's ranch." Kate welcomed them inside, touched by their thoughtfulness. Elena immediately took charge of the kitchen, heating water for coffee and setting out a breakfast that made Kate realize how hungry she was. As they ate, the Mendozas shared stories about Thomas James, his kindness to their family, his stubborn independence, his unexpected sense of humor. Kate listened eagerly, building a picture of the uncle she'd never known. "He was a good man," Elena said. "He paid Javier fairly when other ranchers would not hire a Mexican at all. When I was sick 2 winters ago, he brought medicine from Silver Junction himself, riding through a snowstorm. He taught me to track animals," Miguel added shyly, "and how to read English books." "The marshal has not returned?" Javier asked, noticing Rhett's absence. "He stayed in town last night," Kate explained. "He said he would come by this morning before heading back to Copper Ridge." The Mendozas exchanged a glance that Kate couldn't interpret. "The marshal is a good man also," Elena said carefully. "It is rare for him to spend so many days away from his duties." Before Kate could respond, the sound of approaching riders drew them outside. Rhett was coming down the trail, but he wasn't alone. 3 other men rode with him, all armed, their expressions grim. "Miss James," Rhett called, dismounting quickly. "I need you to go inside with Mrs. Mendoza and the children. Now." "What's happening?" Kate asked, fear blooming in her chest. "Harlan Blackwell," Rhett said, his voice low and urgent. "He's in Silverdale asking questions about you and the James property. These men are deputies from Silver Junction." Kate felt the blood drain from her face. "Blackwell, here, how?" "No time to explain," Rhett said, taking her arm and guiding her toward the cabin. "Please go inside. Javier, you too. If there's trouble, get them out the back way toward your place." Mendoza nodded grimly, herding his wife and children into the cabin. Kate resisted, turning back to Rhett. "Why would he come here? He took everything I had in Santa Fe." "Not everything," Rhett said. "You still had the deed, and now we know it's legitimate. My guess is he found out the property is worth more than he thought. Silver Junction's records show your uncle filed a mining claim last year, just before he died. Small vein of silver on the north ridge of your property." Kate stared at him in shock. "There's silver here. Enough to make the property valuable to someone like Blackwell. Now please, go inside." This time Kate allowed herself to be led into the cabin, but she stopped at the doorway. "Be careful, Rhett. Blackwell is persuasive and dangerous." "So am I when I need to be," Rhett replied with a grim smile. "Stay inside no matter what you hear." Inside, Kate paced anxiously while the Mendozas huddled near the back door. Elena whispered prayers in Spanish, her arms around her children. "How did Blackwell find me?" Kate asked Mendoza. "Silverdale is small," he replied. "Word travels fast when strangers arrive." "If he was already looking for you." The sound of more riders approaching silenced their speculation. Through the window, Kate could see 5 men coming down the trail, 4 rough-looking types she didn't recognize, and in the lead, Harlan Blackwell. He looked exactly as she remembered, handsome in a polished way, with carefully styled dark hair and expensive clothes. His smile, once charming to her, now seemed predatory as he greeted Rhett and the deputies. Kate couldn't hear the conversation clearly, but she could see Blackwell gesturing animatedly while Rhett stood firm, one hand resting near his holstered pistol. The tension was palpable, even from a distance. Then Blackwell spotted her through the window, and his smile widened. He said something to Rhett, who shook his head emphatically. One of the men with Blackwell moved his hand toward his gun, and suddenly everyone was drawing weapons. "Get down," Mendoza shouted, pulling Kate away from the window just as the first shots were fired. Kate huddled on the floor, heart pounding as gunfire erupted outside. Elena clutched her children, murmuring desperate prayers. Mendoza crept to the window, peering cautiously out. "The marshal and the deputies are using the well and woodpile for cover," he reported. "Blackwell's men are behind their horses and the large oak." More shots rang out and then a shout of pain. Kate couldn't tell who had been hit. "We need to get out," Mendoza decided. "They are too many, and if they circle around—" "I'm not leaving," Kate said firmly. "This is my home. I won't be driven from it by Harlan Blackwell or anyone else." "Miss James, no. Take your family to safety, Mr. Mendoza. I understand, but I'm staying." Mendoza looked torn, but a pleading look from his wife decided him. "The root cellar," he said quickly. "If you won't leave, hide there. It can be secured from the inside, and they might not find it if they search the cabin." It was a reasonable compromise. Kate helped Elena gather the children, and they slipped out the back door during a lull in the gunfire, staying low and using the garden for cover as they made their way toward the trees that would lead them to the Mendoza home. Kate retrieved her uncle's journal and the money Mendoza had given her, securing both in her pockets before heading for the root cellar. Just as she reached the door, a loud crash came from the front of the cabin. Someone was breaking in. Heart pounding, Kate yanked open the cellar door and descended quickly, pulling it closed above her. In the dim light filtering through the cracks, she found the interior bolt Mendoza had mentioned and slid it into place. The root cellar was cool and earthy smelling, lined with shelves of preserved food. Kate crouched in the farthest corner, straining to hear what was happening above. Footsteps moved through the cabin, accompanied by the sound of furniture being overturned and glass breaking. "She's not here." A voice called, not Blackwell's, but one of his men. "Must have run off with the Mexicans." More footsteps, heavier this time. "Keep searching," Blackwell's smooth voice ordered. "She can't have gone far, and find that deed." Kate held her breath as the footsteps moved closer to the cellar door. There was a pause, and for a terrifying moment, she thought she'd been discovered. Then the footsteps moved away back toward the cabin. Outside, the gunfire had died down. Kate couldn't tell who had won the confrontation, but she feared the worst when she heard Blackwell say, "Once you find the girl and the deed, burn it all. Make it look like an accident. No one will question it. These old cabins go up in flames all the time." Kate bit back a cry of outrage. Not only did Blackwell want to steal her land, he intended to destroy her uncle's home, her home, to cover his tracks. She felt around in the darkness, searching for anything that might serve as a weapon, but found only jars and root vegetables. Time passed agonizingly slowly as she huddled in the cellar, listening to the sounds of her home being ransacked. The light filtering through the cracks began to fade. Afternoon was turning to evening. Had Rhett been killed in the gunfight? Were the Mendozas safe? And how long could she hide before Blackwell's men thought to check out buildings more thoroughly? Just as despair began to overtake her, Kate heard something that made her heart leap. Rhett's voice calling her name. "Kate, Kate, are you here?" She scrambled to the cellar door but hesitated before unbolting it. What if it was a trick? What if Blackwell was forcing Rhett to call for her? Kate, it's safe now. Blackwell's men are gone. It's just me and the deputies. Still cautious, Kate called back. How do I know it's really you? A pause then. You said he took your hope, and I said I'd lend you mine till yours grew back. Relief flooded through her. Kate slid back the bolt and pushed against the cellar door. It swung open to reveal Rhett standing there, a cut on his forehead and his clothes dusty, but very much alive. Thank God, he breathed, helping her climb out. I thought they might have taken you. Kate threw her arms around him, propriety forgotten in her relief. I thought you were dead. I heard the shooting. Rhett's arms came around her, holding her tightly for a brief, precious moment before he gently set her back. One of the deputies was hit in the arm, and 2 of Blackwell's men were wounded. The others fled, taking Blackwell with them. The deputies are pursuing them back towards Silver Junction. The Mendozas, safe. Javier came back with some of the men from town once his family was secure. They arrived just as Blackwell's men were retreating. Kate looked toward the cabin, relieved to see it still standing. He was going to burn it down after he found the deed. He won't get the chance, Rhett assured her. The Silver Junction sheriff is sending more men. Blackwell won't get far. He's wanted in 3 counties now. As the adrenaline of fear and relief faded, Kate's legs began to tremble. Rhett noticed immediately, guiding her to a fallen log where she could sit. I'm sorry, he said, settling beside her. I never should have left you alone last night. When I heard in town this morning that Blackwell had been asking questions about Thomas James's property. You couldn't have known, Kate said. I never thought he would follow me here. In Santa Fe, he got everything I had. Except the deed, Rhett said. And apparently that was worth more than he initially thought with that silver claim. Is it really valuable? Kate asked, still trying to absorb this new information. Valuable enough to interest Blackwell, Rhett replied. Your uncle kept it quiet, but he filed the claim properly. The assayer's report suggests it's a small vein but high quality. Nothing like the main strike that built Silverdale, but enough to provide steady income for years if it's worked properly. Kate shook her head in wonder. I came here expecting at best a small ranch, at worst a worthless plot of land. Instead, I have a home, livestock, and now a silver mine. Life takes unexpected turns, Rhett said with a small smile. Sometimes for the worse, sometimes for the better. And sometimes, Kate said softly, someone lends you hope when you need it most and everything changes. Their eyes met, and in that moment, something shifted between them, a recognition of feelings that had been building since that first encounter on the bench in Copper Ridge. Rhett's hand found hers, his touch gentle but sure. Kate, he began, but was interrupted by the arrival of Javier Mendoza and several other men from town. Miss James, you are safe, Mendoza exclaimed. When I returned with help and could not find you. I was hiding in the root cellar, as you suggested, Kate explained, reluctantly withdrawing her hand from Rhett's. It was a perfect hiding place. The men set about checking the property for any remaining threat, while Mendoza inspected the cabin. They made a mess, he reported, but nothing that cannot be fixed. Some broken dishes, overturned furniture. The structure is sound. Thank you, Kate said, for coming back with help. It was brave of you. Senor Thomas would have expected no less, Mendoza replied simply. This is your home now. We protect our neighbors in Silverdale Creek. As night fell, the men from town departed with promises to return the next day to help with repairs. Mendoza left to bring his family home, leaving Kate and Rhett alone at the cabin. You don't have to stay, Kate told him as they sat on the porch, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. I know you need to get back to Copper Ridge. I'm not leaving you alone, not with Blackwell still out there, Rhett said firmly. The deputies will likely catch him before he gets far, but until I know for certain he's been apprehended, I'm staying right here. Kate should have protested further, insisted on her independence. Instead, she found herself saying, "I'm glad." Rhett smiled, the expression softening his usually serious face. "So am I." They worked together to straighten the cabin, righting furniture and sweeping up broken glass and pottery. The destruction wasn't as bad as it could have been. Blackwell's men had been searching for specific items, not trying to destroy everything. "They were looking for the deed," Kate said as they finished, "but I had it with me in the root cellar. And the money Mendoza gave you. That too." Kate pulled both from her pocket along with her uncle's journal. "And this, it helped me understand him better, why he left me the property." Rhett nodded. Tom James wasn't one for grand gestures or many words, but when he believed in something or someone he stood by it completely. "You make it sound like you knew him well," Kate observed. "Better than I let on," Rhett admitted. "I didn't want to influence your feelings about the property or your uncle, but yes, I knew Tom. He helped me when I was first appointed marshal, taught me about the backcountry, introduced me to people I needed to know. He was a friend, I suppose you could say, though he'd have scoffed at the term." Kate smiled, imagining her taciturn uncle dismissing such sentimentality. In his journal, he wrote about offering help without making a fuss about it. "It sounds like that's exactly what he did for you." "And what I tried to do for his niece when she needed it," Rhett said quietly. The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with unspoken feelings. Kate found herself studying Rhett's face in the lamplight, the strong line of his jaw, the small scar near his right eyebrow, the warmth in his blue eyes as they met hers. "Rhett," she began, not quite sure what she wanted to say, but feeling she needed to say something. A knock at the door interrupted the moment. It was one of the deputies from Silver Junction, tired and dust-covered but bearing news. "We got him, Marshal," he reported. "Caught up to Blackwell and his men about 5 miles east of town. They didn't surrender easy, but we took 'em all alive. They're in the Silver Junction jail now, awaiting transfer to the territorial court." Relief washed over Kate. "So it's over. Truly over." "Yes, madam," the deputy confirmed. "Blackwell's going away for a long time. Fraud, theft, attempted murder of law officers. The judge won't look kindly on any of it." "Thank you," Kate said fervently, "for everything you and the other deputies did today." The deputy tipped his hat. "Just doing our duty, madam. Marshal Irving's a respected man in these parts. When he asks for help, folks respond." He turned to Rhett. "Sheriff said to tell you he can handle things from here if you need to get back to Copper Ridge." Rhett nodded. "Appreciate that. I'll ride over to Silver Junction tomorrow to give my statement, then head back." After the deputy left, a new silence fell between Kate and Rhett, not tense, but full of unresolved questions. "So you'll be leaving tomorrow," Kate said, trying to keep her voice neutral. "I should," Rhett replied. "I've been away from my post longer than I intended." "Of course, I understand." Rhett stepped closer, his expression serious. "Kate, these past few days." He stopped, seeming to struggle with his words. "I came to Silverdale to help you secure your property, nothing more, but something's happened that I didn't expect." Kate's heart quickened. "What's that?" "I think I'm falling in love with you," Rhett said simply. "And the thought of riding away tomorrow feels like the hardest thing I've ever had to do." The words hung in the air between them, honest and unvarnished. Kate felt a surge of emotion so strong it nearly took her breath away. "Then don't," she whispered. "Don't what?" "Don't ride away. Not yet." Kate stepped closer, close enough to see the flecks of darker blue in his eyes. "Stay. Another day, another week, long enough for us to understand what this is between us." Rhett's hand came up to gently touch her cheek. "Are you sure? After everything with Blackwell, I wouldn't blame you for being wary of any man's intentions." "You're nothing like Harlan Blackwell," Kate said firmly. "He took my hope and gave me lies in return. You offered your hope freely, expecting nothing back." She covered his hand with her own. And somehow, in these few days, you've helped me find something I thought was lost forever, not just hope, but the possibility of love." The kiss, when it came, was gentle and questioning at first, then deeper as Kate responded with a fervor that surprised them both. Rhett's arms went around her, drawing her close, and Kate felt a sense of rightness, of coming home in a way that had nothing to do with property deeds or inherited land. When they finally parted, both a little breathless, Rhett rested his forehead against hers. "I'll stay," he promised. "As long as you want me to." "And if I want you to stay forever?" Kate asked, suddenly bold. Rhett smiled, the expression transforming his serious face into something radiant. "Then I'd say Thomas James was even wiser than I thought, leaving his property to a woman with such excellent judgment." Kate laughed, joy bubbling up from some deep well inside her that she'd thought had run dry. "I think my uncle would approve of you lending me your hope," she said. "And of what's grown from it." "What has grown from it?" Rhett asked, his arm still around her waist. Kate smiled up at him, feeling truly hopeful for the first time in longer than she could remember. "Something strong and true," she said softly. "Something that might last a lifetime if we tend it carefully." "I think," Rhett said, brushing a strand of hair from her face with tender fingers, "that's a crop worth cultivating." And as he bent to kiss her again, Kate knew that the hope he'd lent her had indeed taken root, and was blossoming into something far more precious and enduring than either of them had anticipated when they'd met on that dusty bench in Copper Ridge just days ago. The weeks that followed were a time of transformation, both for Kate's property and for her heart. Rhett stayed, riding to Copper Ridge only long enough to arrange an extended leave of absence and to collect his personal belongings. His deputy, a capable young man named Frank Wilson, was more than happy to assume temporary responsibility for the town's law enforcement, especially when Rhett explained the circumstances. "About time you found something, or someone worth stepping away from the badge for," Wilson had apparently said, according to Rhett's slightly embarrassed retelling. "Even if it's just temporary." With Blackwell and his men securely behind bars awaiting trial in the territorial court, Kate could focus on making her uncle's property truly her own. The cabin was repaired and improved, with Rhett and Javier Mendoza working together to fix the damage from Blackwell's search. And to make additions, Kate had envisioned a larger window to let in more light, bookshelves for her uncle's volumes and the ones Rhett brought from Copper Ridge, a proper desk where she could write letters and eventually prepare lessons. The silver claim proved to be exactly as described, modest but valuable. After much discussion, Kate and Rhett decided to hire a small crew to work it, with Javier Mendoza as foreman. The arrangement would provide steady employment for several local men who had been struggling since the main Silverdale mines played out, and would generate enough income to support the ranch and allow for improvements without fundamentally changing the character of the property Kate had come to love. As autumn deepened, turning the aspen leaves to gold and the air crisp with the promise of winter, Kate and Rhett settled into a routine that felt both new and somehow familiar, as if they'd known each other far longer than the few months since that fateful meeting in Copper Ridge. They rode together daily, with Rhett teaching Kate about the land where the best hunting was to be found, which slopes were treacherous in wet weather, how to read the signs of changing seasons in the plants and wildlife. Kate absorbed it all eagerly, connecting with the mountains and valleys in a way she never had with the desert landscape of Santa Fe. In the evenings, they read aloud from her uncle's books, discussed ideas for the future, and gradually shared the stories of their lives before they'd met. Kate learned about Rhett's childhood dreams of becoming a lawyer. His brief time at a Denver school before his father's death called him home. His complex relationship with the badge he'd inherited along with his father's sense of duty and justice. In turn, she told him about growing up in the shadow of war, her father's death, her mother's determined efforts to provide Kate with education and opportunity despite their reduced circumstances, her own love of teaching and of watching young minds discover new ideas. "You miss it," Red observed one evening as Kate described a particularly rewarding moment with a former student. "Teaching. I do," Kate admitted. "It was more than just a way to earn my living. It felt like a calling." "Then perhaps you should answer that call here," Rhett suggested. "Silverdale may be struggling, but there are still families with children. From what I've heard, they've had no proper teacher since the main mine closed and the previous schoolmaster left for more prosperous territory." The idea took hold in Kate's mind, growing alongside her feelings for Rhett. She made inquiries in town and discovered that, indeed, there were 12 school-aged children in Silverdale Creek, whose education consisted of whatever their parents could manage at home after long days of work. The town's small church building, used only on Sundays when a circuit-riding preacher visited, stood empty the rest of the week. With permission from the town council grateful for any sign of renewed life in their community, Kate began holding classes there 3 days a week. Her students ranged from 6-year-old Lucia Mendoza to 16-year-old Benjamin Fletcher, the grandson of the old man Kate had met her first day in town. They were eager, if somewhat behind in their studies compared to Kate's students in Santa Fe. But what they lacked in formal education, they made up for in practical knowledge and enthusiasm. "Miss James," young Miguel Mendoza asked during a lesson on geography, "why do we need to know about places we'll never see? Isn't it more important to know our own land?" "To know your own land truly, Miguel, you must understand how it fits into the larger world," Kate replied. "The mountains you see every day were formed by the same forces that shaped mountains in far-off countries. The creek that runs through your father's property is part of a river system that eventually reaches the ocean. Nothing exists in isolation, not land, not people, not ideas." Watching from the back of the church, where he'd stopped in to fix a broken window, Rhett had smiled at her response. Later, he told her, "You're a natural teacher. Those children are lucky to have you." "I'm the lucky one," Kate replied. "Teaching them gives me purpose beyond just claiming my inheritance. It makes me feel like I'm honoring my uncle's legacy by contributing to the community he was part of." As winter approached, bringing the first dusting of snow to the higher elevations, Rhett and Kate faced a decision they'd been avoiding. His leave of absence from his marshal duties was coming to an end, and he would soon need to return to Copper Ridge or resign his position permanently. "I could ride back and forth," he suggested one evening as they sat before the fire in what they now both thought of as their cabin. "It's not an impossible distance." "In summer, perhaps," Kate said, "but winter in these mountains. The passes would be treacherous if not impassable. And your duties as marshal require you to be present in Copper Ridge, not spending days on the trail." "Then what do you suggest?" Rhett asked, though his tone suggested he already knew what she was thinking. "One of us needs to make a choice," Kate said quietly. "Either I come with you to Copper Ridge or I resign as marshal and stay here," Rhett finished for her. "Kate, I would never ask you to leave this place. I've seen how you've connected with the land, with your students, with the community. This is where you belong. And you?" Kate asked, her heart in her throat. "Where do you belong, Rhett Irving?" He took her hands in his blue eyes serious in the firelight. "I used to think it was behind a marshal's badge, following my father's path, but these past months have shown me something different." He smiled, a tender expression that made Kate's breath catch. "I belong wherever you are. The question is, what do I do with that knowledge?" Before Kate could respond, a knock at the door interrupted them. It was Javier Mendoza, looking apologetic for the late hour but clearly bearing news that couldn't wait. "Miss James, Marshal, there's been word from Silver Junction. A telegram came for you, Marshal. The deputy brought it over." He handed Rhett a folded paper. Rhett read it quickly, his expression growing serious. "It's from the territorial governor's office," he said. "They're reorganizing the county jurisdictions. Copper Ridge and Silverdale Creek are being combined into a single jurisdiction, with a new district courthouse to be built halfway between the two towns." "What does that mean for your position?" Kate asked. "They're offering me the role of district marshal," Rhett said, sounding stunned. "I'd be responsible for both towns and the territory between, with deputies in each location. The main office would be at the new courthouse." "Which would be?" Kate prompted. "About an hour's ride from here," Rhett said, a slow smile spreading across his face. "And from Copper Ridge." Mendoza grinned. "It seems the decision is being made for you, Marshal. A sign, perhaps?" After he left, Kate and Rhett sat in silence for a long moment, absorbing the implications of this unexpected development. "It seems too perfect a solution," Kate said finally. "Almost as if someone arranged it specifically to solve our dilemma." "The reorganization has been discussed for years," Rhett said, "but the timing is fortunate." He looked at her, his expression turning serious again. "Kate, regardless of this news, I need to tell you something. I've been carrying it with me for weeks now, waiting for the right moment." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wooden box, carved with a pattern of aspen leaves. "I had this made by Mr. Chen, the cabinet maker in Copper Ridge. He's quite skilled with small pieces." Kate took the box with trembling hands, opening it to reveal a simple gold band set with a small but perfect sapphire. "It was my mother's," Rhett explained. "One of the few fine things she owned. She told me once to give it to the woman who restored my belief in possibilities." His voice grew husky with emotion. "Kate James, you are that woman. When you said he took your hope and I offered to lend you mine, I had no idea that in helping you find yours again, mine would grow stronger than ever before." He took her hands, the ring box cradled between them. "I love you. Not just for your courage or your kindness, or your determination, though I admire all those qualities. I love the way you look at the world, how you find beauty in this rough country, how you've made a place for yourself here as if you were born to it. I love the teacher who shows children that their small corner of the world connects to something larger, and I love the woman who has shown me that my life can be more than the badge I wear." Tears filled Kate's eyes, but they were tears of joy, not sorrow. "Rhett Irving," she said softly, "when I came to Colorado, I had nothing but a deed and a desperate hope that it might be worth something. I found a home, a purpose, and a community. But most precious of all, I found you a man who offered hope when mine was gone, and in doing so, gave me something far more valuable." "What's that?" Rhett asked, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "Love," Kate said simply. "Real love built on respect and kindness and shared dreams. The kind that grows stronger with each challenge overcome together." She squeezed his hands. "Yes, Rhett. Yes, I will marry you." The kiss they shared was a promise, sealed in firelight as snow began to fall softly outside, dusting the valley in white as if to mark a new beginning. They were married in the Silverdale Creek Church on Christmas Day, with the entire town in attendance along with friends from Copper Ridge who had made the journey despite the winter weather. Mrs. Cooper came, insisting on baking the wedding cake herself. Deputy Wilson stood as Rhett's best man, while Alina Mendoza was Kate's matron of honor. The church had been transformed with pine boughs, red berries, and candles, their warm light reflecting off the fresh snow visible through the windows. Kate wore a dress of deep blue velvet, ordered from Denver with some of the silver mine's first profits. Around her neck hung her mother's locket, and on her finger, next to the sapphire engagement ring, Rhett placed a simple gold band as they exchanged their vows. "I once lent you my hope," he said, his voice clear and strong in the hushed church, "but you've given it back tenfold. Today I give you my name, my heart, and my future, grateful beyond words that you've chosen to share your life with mine." "When I lost everything," Kate replied, "I thought hope was a luxury I could no longer afford. You showed me it was actually a necessity I couldn't live without." She smiled through tears of happiness. "Today I give you my trust, my love, and the promise that whatever life brings us, we'll face it together, with hope as our foundation and love as our guide." The celebration afterward was joyous, with music and dancing in the town hall, decorated for the occasion with every available scrap of finery the townsfolk could contribute. The silver miners Kate and Rhett employed had taken up a collection and presented them with a pair of finely crafted silver candlesticks. "For your table," the head miner said gruffly, "so there's always light in your home, even on the darkest nights." As the evening wore on, with the party showing no signs of ending soon, Rhett took Kate's hand and led her outside, where the full moon turned the snow-covered valley into a silvery wonderland. "Happy?" he asked, his breath forming clouds in the cold air. "More than I ever thought possible," Kate replied, leaning against him as he wrapped his coat around them both. "A year ago I was alone, teaching other people's children for a meager salary with no family and few prospects. Now I have a home, a husband, a school of my own, and a whole community that feels like family. And a silver mine," Rhett added with a grin. "Don't forget that," Kate laughed. "Yes, and a silver mine, though that seems the least important of all my new blessings." "Your uncle would be pleased," Rhett said, growing more serious. "Not just that you've made his property thrive, but that you've found happiness here. That was what he wanted for you, according to his journal." "I think he'd be especially pleased about you," Kate said, turning to face her new husband. "In his last entry, he wrote about the importance of knowing when to accept help and of offering it to others. That's exactly what you did for me that day in Copper Ridge." Rhett smiled, pulling her closer. "Best decision I ever made, offering hope to a bedraggled stranger on a bench." "Second best," Kate corrected, rising on tiptoes to kiss him. "Asking me to marry you was the best." "No argument there, Mrs. Irving," Rhett murmured against her lips. Above them, stars scattered across the winter sky like diamonds on velvet, while inside the town hall, their friends and neighbors continued the celebration. But for that moment, Kate and Rhett existed in a world of their own, making a world built on borrowed hope that had taken root, grown strong, and blossomed into a love neither had expected but both would cherish for all the days to come. In the years that followed, the small silver mining operation on the Irving property, as it came to be known, provided steady employment for a dozen men and reliable income for Kate and Rhett. True to the governor's plan, a courthouse was built halfway between Copper Ridge and Silverdale Creek, and Rhett served as district marshal with deputies in both towns, allowing him to be home with Kate most nights while still fulfilling his duties to the communities under his protection. The school Kate established in the church grew as families, attracted by the prospect of steady work and proper education for their children, moved back to Silverdale Creek. Within 3 years, the town had raised enough money to build a proper schoolhouse, with Kate as headmistress and, eventually, a second teacher to help with the growing number of students. In the spring of 1883, Kate gave birth to their first child, a daughter they named Elizabeth, after Rhett's mother. 2 years later, Thomas James Irving joined the family, named for the uncle whose legacy had brought Kate to Colorado and, indirectly, to Rhett. Life in the mountain valley was never easy. Winters were harsh. The work was demanding, and the isolation could be difficult. But Kate and Rhett faced each challenge together, their love and partnership growing stronger with each passing season. On the 5th anniversary of their first meeting, Rhett presented Kate with a special gift, a small silver locket he'd had made from the first ore extracted from their mine. Inside was a tiny scrap of paper on which he'd written, "Hope lent is hope multiplied." "It's perfect," Kate said, tears in her eyes as he fastened it around her neck. "A reminder of how far we've come from that day on the bench. And how far we have yet to go together," Rhett added, gathering her close. From the doorway of the cabin expanded now to accommodate their growing family. They watched their children playing in the meadow where the first spring wildflowers were beginning to bloom. The silver thread of the creek caught the afternoon sunlight, and in the distance, the mountains stood eternal against the blue Colorado sky. "You ever think about what might have happened if you hadn't stopped to offer water to a desperate stranger that day?" Kate asked, leaning her head against Rhett's shoulder. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But then I remember something my father once told me, that the measure of a life well lived isn't in the paths not taken, but in recognizing the right path when it appears before you." He kissed the top of her head. "You were my right path, Kate, even if I didn't know it at the time." "And you were mine," Kate replied, turning in his arms to look up at him, still handsome, still steady, still the man who had offered hope when hers was gone. "The day Harlan Blackwell betrayed me seemed like the worst day of my life. Now I know it was actually the beginning of the best days. Life has a way of surprising us," Rhett said with a smile. "Speaking of which," he reached into his pocket and pulled out a letter bearing an official seal. "This came today from the Territorial Education Office. They're establishing a regional school board, and they want you to serve as the representative for this county." Kate took the letter, scanning it with growing excitement. "This is a tremendous opportunity. I could help shape education policy for children throughout the territory." "You deserve it," Rhett said proudly. "No one has done more to promote education in these parts than you have." "I couldn't have done any of it without you," Kate said, meaning it with all her heart. "Your belief in me, your support, it's made everything possible." Their conversation was interrupted by the children running up, eager to show them a nest of baby rabbits they'd discovered near the creek. As Kate and Rhett followed their excited offspring across the meadow, hand in hand, Kate felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought her here. From a desperate woman with nothing but a questionable deed and a broken heart, to a wife, mother, teacher, and respected member of a community, it was a transformation she could never have imagined that dusty day in Copper Ridge when a tall marshal with kind blue eyes had offered water and borrowed hope. The hope had long since become her own, growing and multiplying like the wildflowers that carpeted the meadow each spring. But Kate never forgot that it had started with a simple, generous offer from a man who recognized despair and responded with compassion. Every night before sleep, she whispered the same words to Rhett as they held each other close. "Thank you for the hope you lent me." And every night he whispered back, "Thank you for helping it grow." Together, they had built something neither could have created alone, a life rich in love, purpose, and possibility. In a valley where silver ran through the hills and hope flowed as steady and true as the creek that gave the town its name.